Okay, here we go. So what I have here is I have a Pro Tools session that I received not that long ago to mix. Now, whether it's a Pro Tools session, a Logic session, Ableton, Cubase, whatever, kind of irrelevant. When we're talking about organizing sessions and being properly labeled, etc., it's all the same. It doesn't matter what DAW you're working in, whatever you're comfortable and whatever works for you. The same all applies that we want to be as organized as possible. So when I open a session like this, I've got a couple red flags that jump out to me. First of all, I've got edit points all over the place, which in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does put a big question mark whether this is actually done or not, or whether it's still in progress or what's going on. So I usually take a quick look and kind of look at these edits and make sure they're in good spots. And when I get in there, I start to realize that some of these edits are in pretty bad spots, okay? So here we've got an edit that's going across a kick drum here, problematic. And then another edit here that's kind of in a random spot. So right away, this is telling me problematic. The other things I'm looking at, I've got sends going in random spots. So these are sends or external buses. We don't exactly know what's going on here because they're not really labeled. It's just going out to 1 and 2. I've got some EQs here, not the end of the world. Then I've got what looks like some kind of a mix bus situation here. Some plugins are grayed out, some are on. I'm not sure which ones we're supposed to be using. I've got a reverb on that. Again, not the end of the world, but are we supposed to use it? And so on and so forth. So, you know, we've got an auxiliary here, and I don't know what it's doing or where it's going. So these are the kind of things when I open it up. So right away, I'm not mixing anymore. Now I'm fixing stuff up. So if you're a mixer and getting paid to mix, all of a sudden, you're working for free at this point because you're not mixing anymore. So if you hire a mixer to do this stuff, you're actually paying that person to do all the work you should have done and not spending the time mixing your awesome song. And again, even if it's yourself mixing it, you're still spending the time cleaning things up. So this is something I always want to deal with ahead of time. So when I do get a session like this, I need to figure out what's going on. Do I need any of these plugins? Do I need any of these sends or auxiliary returns, anything? So I'm going to look through and, you know, probably get rid of the majority of this stuff. But the other big question I have here is this stuff actually ready to go? Has it been edited? Has it been tune time? Is that a consideration? And by that, I don't necessarily mean, is this quantized to drum machine specifications? I don't mean that, but is it done? Has it been gone over? Is it cleaned up and ready to go? Are these the master takes, or were these just kind of left off for someone to figure out, like myself? The other thing I'm looking at is we've got playlists here and labeling that's not quite exactly clean. It looks like 0.04. This could be a random playlist. I'm just not really sure. Okay, so problematic. Now, when I get a session that is mix ready, it's quite a different scenario. So what I'm going to show you now is a session that, to me anyway, when I open it up, this does make me happy because it looks like it's been all ready to go. So here are the things I'm looking for. I've got audio files that are all consolidated nicely. There's no edits. There's no blank spots or muted sections. Things are labeled really nicely. If I look over on this side, on the title plates here, everything is very easily legible. I can see it's a shaker. I can see it's a tambourine. I can see it's electronic kick. I can see a snare delay, kick, snare, and so on and so forth. I can see that all of these are consolidated nicely. There's no kind of room for error. There's no question that these have been gone through and been prepared, okay? So when I see a session like this, I know I'm in pretty good shape. There's still, things I'm going to be looking for. as far as, I might check phase and stuff like that and drums and on bass DIs versus amp and stuff like that. But as far as being mix ready, it's in really good shape. We've got cue markers up here, so we've got the verse, chorus, and so on and so forth. Everything's laid out for me really nicely. I've got tempo changes all locked in as far as I can tell, and everything looks really good. Now, whether, again, this is in Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, Ableton, whatever, this is the kind of thing you want to see. Now, I do want to reiterate that, or make mention of at least, that this is just kind of the way I do things, okay? And what works for me. There's hundreds and thousands of other engineers and mixers out there that have their own workflow, right? So really what it comes down to is you figuring out the best workflow for yourself to make things work. This has worked really well for me. But again, everybody has their own way of doing things. I know some colleagues of mine, what they do when they get a session like this is they immediately kind of go through, and instead of having consolidated clips, they'll strip things just to make sure that there's no noise right off the top here of any of these specific audio files. I don't really go that far as long as I know that all of these have been cleaned up nicely. But again, everybody has their own way of doing things. So you will see that kind of scenario, whatever works for you. The important thing is to know that everything's been cleaned up. One of the main reasons we want to consolidate everything to the beginning of the session is so that if you're delivering tracks to a mixer that works in a different DAW. So let's say you're working in Logic or Ableton and you're sending it to a mixer, or that works in Pro Tools. Or perhaps you're a creator and you do all your creating in Ableton and then move over to Pro Tools or Cubase or Logic or whatever to mix, which is also a pretty popular thing. Ableton's great for creating and writing and stuff, but a lot of people prefer moving over to another DAW to do their actual mix. Anyway you slice it, when you're importing files into a new DAW, the easiest way to make sure that they all line up is to make sure they all start the same at the same spot. So if you have files that you had consolidated that are all different lengths, and then a mixer goes and pulls those into another DAW, they're not going to line up properly, at least not easily. So very important that we consolidate everything to the beginning, and that's why we do that. We've got no plugins, we've got no sends, we've got hopefully no automation here either, because that's, we see we have some automation here. So you know what, I'm going to go and get rid of that because that's something I'll deal with in my mix. I don't really want any automation from anything else because I don't really know what the purpose of that was for. And when it comes down to it, once I mix, that's all going to change anyway. So once I have all this sorted, I'm kind of good to go to get it ready into my mix template and really start mixing right away. So before we were talking about kind of a messy session, a session that had a bunch of stuff that needed to be gone through. I mean, that can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours just to sort through. And in the context of, mix time, that's a lot of time, right? You can have your ears shot within 4 hours, and then, your ears are not at its peak anymore. So the more of this stuff that is done and we can look at a session like this and be on our way into mixing, then my life is good. I'm having a good day and we can get into mixing really quickly. So now what I'd like to do is take a look at a session that I had just finished, kind of my working session, and then move on from that working session and then prep it so that I can get into my own mix, just as I would if I was sending it to somebody else or sending it to my own self to mix. Because really at the end of the day, when I get a session ready to mix, whether it's myself that's mixing it or someone else, it's the exact same process. I just treat it as I'm moving on to the mix process, and whoever that is, in this case would be myself, I want to make sure that I'm just concentrating on mixing and not dealing with technical stuff or editing or anything like that. And for you guys at home that are, you know, working on your own mixes, I can't tell you how much time that saves by allowing yourself to just concentrate on the mix rather than kind of having your mind kind of scattered in, okay, I'm mixing, but I still have to do tuning. I still have to do editing. What's that track? It's not labeled. Like, it's just noisy, right? And in the end of the day, your mixes are going to take 2x, 3 times as long. And the end result most likely won't be as good because you didn't set yourself up to concentrate and to focus. So the next thing we're going to do is look at a session that's at the end of the working or recording process, and we're going to get it ready to start mixing.